Hi folks, in today's video I'll be reviewing the MythCraft core rulebook from QuasiReal Publishing. If you're interested in how this stacks up to other D20 systems, figuring out if it's a good fit for your table, then stick around because we're going to cover the good, the bad, and everything in between. QuasiReal Publishing sent over 2 copies of this, one for us to review and one to give away to one of you lucky folks. So stick around to the end to find out how you can get your own copy of the physical core rulebook. Before I kind of talk about anything, I do want to mention that QuasiReal has a very extensive wiki for the MythCraft role-playing game. It has, I think, all of the rules on there, so you don't necessarily have to pick up the physical core rulebook or even the digital copy, but you know, there is something to be said for having a actual book or a PDF book that you have. It's not on the web. The wiki, I think, is very nice to be able to go and reference things, as well as, you know, get a quick start, figure out if this is something that you want to play, and then you can always go and get whether it's the physical book or the PDF, to have and not need to search through a wiki and wait for pages to load and all of that stuff. So MythCraft is a crunchy, they describe it as medium crunch, TTRPG that focuses a lot on options for character customization and specializing. The rules talk about always referring to specifics over general, which I think is very good to note for this system. Also just kind of in general for any TTRPGs, yes, if there's a specific rule for that, go with that over the general rule. MythCraft is a fantasy game that takes place in the world of Ansera. I did a little bit of reading on the setting on the wiki, but I'm not going to talk about it here because it's not really addressed very much in the book. So this is a review of the core rulebook. Now, there are references to Ansera in the core rulebook, especially in the lineages section, and I'll get more onto lineages in a moment. But there is not a setting overview in this book. And that is something that I will note as a downside, something I was very much expecting in a core rulebook. If you have a game that it is set in a setting, tell me about the setting. Sure, I can go read about it in the wiki, but I want a core rulebook to have the core elements of the game. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but I think a better name for this book would have been the player core. Now, MythCraft has a lot of options for your character creation. It has maybe one of the larger variety of lineages in a core rulebook. I like that there are the traditional fantasy races like dwarves and elves, but then you also have things like golems and the Raideen, as well as the Brunei, which there are a few of them that I wish they had just, the Brunei feel like gnomes, and I wish they had just used the word gnome because that's not, to my knowledge, a copywritten trademarked term the way that hobbits are, which is why you always see halfling in TTRPGs. And especially because there isn't the details on the setting, you only get these glimpses at it in the lineage, because they do talk about how these lineages, what they are like, and some overviews, but it feels a little ooh, we're using a special name to make it feel different from other TTRPGs when it's not really that different, for those, at least those specific things. And I tried looking up to see, is Brunei, is that a different cultural reference that I'm not familiar with? And I did find a Brunei gnome that has a slightly different spelling, but not that particular spelling. So from what I found, it did not feel oh, this is just drawing from a cultural reference that I'm not familiar with. It felt a little strange. Now, some of the other lineages are really interesting. I like that it has the golem, and there are 2 other lineages that feel very much like automaton or magical constructs, that they're not just people type things provides you some really cool options. There's a whole bunch of different kind of animal peoples, a couple of different varieties. There's like a cat folk and dog folks, as well as a kind of bear folk one, as well as a blanket lineage for a variety of like small furry, like you could be a mouse or a bunny under this one lineage. So majority of this book is dedicated to character creation, which is fairly normal for especially a core rule book. You pick your lineage, you pick your BOR, and then you pick your talents and or class. I do find it interesting that this is a system that you don't have to have a class. You don't pick a class until level 2, and the classes are much more focused on, well, you pick a class if you want to have like this tract of talents. It's more of a collection of talents, and some of them are specific to that class. But you don't have to ever pick a class. Now, mechanically, it does seem like that would balance out, that somebody who has not picked a class but has just focused on getting various talents would be mechanically level with somebody who has followed the like class talent chart. I also like that they show the kind of stacks for the classes, the like talent tree that you can see. It is very linear. I think I would have preferred maybe to see some more like branching to it, but I think that's also like within the class there are specializations. But I like that you get to choose the talents as you level up. That's going to allow for a lot of customization with character creation, as well as like it feels like a little less that you are locked into a choice as far as like what your character can do. Than other systems where it's like, well, once you pick a class, like that is pretty much what you are doing. You can multi-class in this system very easily. So I think that's a really interesting choice and something that I haven't really seen. I've either seen like systems that have classes or systems that are completely classless. So it's interesting kind of seeing a little bit of a hybrid of that. Now, as far as the mechanics go, this is a D20 system, so you are going to be rolling a D20 and then adding or subtracting based on your attributes and skills and other abilities. I do like that the way they handle the 8 attributes is you have a -3 to a +12, and that is just what you add. So there's not the like, well, you have a 12, but that means that you add a 1. It's a little bit easier. So in that regard, it's a little less crunchy than some other D20 systems. The other thing that sets it apart from like Pathfinder and D&D, our bigger D20 systems, are action points. So this is once you're into combat, you get a pool of action points, and it's not the same for every character. Your con determines how many action points you get. There's a kind of base level of 3, and then you can either add or subtract. And that tells you how many things you can do. Different things take different amounts of AP. So to move is just your normal standard speed is 1 AP. Different weapons are going to have 1, 2, or 3 APs, and spells as well can have multiple APs. I do like that if you don't use all of your action points during your turn, they become your reaction points and potentially can even roll over into your next action. So I think that can allow for some real strategic choices when it comes to combat. Now, I do think it can potentially complicate, as it's not, I can do, these couple of things during my turn, but it allows for so many different options and so many different strategies. Depending on your table, that might actually make combat take a little bit longer, as well as that might be difficult to track. Like, I know for me, I would probably want to have like little tokens to help remind myself, especially for those reaction points and how many do I have to carry over to the next turn. Like, have that visual representation to help remind me. There are a couple of other rules that I want to bring up that I thought were really cool. There is a system for tracking Goodwill. So tracking, not only you can do it for like a whole village, but also for individual NPCs. Like, what is the social relationship? Do they like you? Do they see you as an enemy? I think that's a really cool, seeing that mechanic in there can be very helpful to help codify some of those relationships. I also like that they have 3 levels of resting and have added this like short 5-minute like catch your breath that basically is like, if anybody is dying, they stabilize. That's a nice thing to see. Just gives you a little bit more option for like, okay, we don't have to sit down for an hour to do all of this. It provides that clear mechanical moment to, have a dying character just stabilize. The way magic works, there are a number of different kind of schools or forms of magic. All of it is done through spells that you can pick up as talents or classes. These are based on the 2 kind of metaphysical attributes that will affect like how you cast kind of all the standard D20 casting. Like there's a pretty extensive spell chapter that has a wide variety of spells. You've got your standard healing spells, combat spells, buff spells, all of those things there. There are animal familiars. It feels like it's going to give you a lot of options, as well as you have just fighters and other characters that aren't magical. You have both magic and non-magic in this world. A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially Marty. If you enjoy our videos and want to support us, make sure you're subscribed and then head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and check out the perks of being a patron. Okay, let's get back to this review. So like I was saying, most of the book is dedicated to character creation. Yeah, it's like 300 pages in that you get to the how to play the game, which is fairly standard for most tabletop RPGs. And honestly, I wish this format was different. For every book that does this, I wish there was at least a introductory guide to how to play the game, maybe at the beginning of the book, and then, okay, let's get into the nitty gritty of like the full rules later on, because I find it very difficult to create a character if I don't understand how the game's played. Like, what are APs? What are the talent? How do I use the talents? How do I play the game to know what are the things that I need to be keeping in mind to build my character? And with that, there are a lot of acronyms that QuasiReal use in MythCraft. This is pretty standard. A lot of games use acronyms just to make it take up less space. But I feel like they don't always do a good job of introducing the acronym early on. Action points as APs, I don't think I actually got the definition of that. I knew that from looking at the wiki, but I don't think I got the definition of that from looking at the book until I got to the how to play the game section. It was referenced very early on, and I tried looking through like the beginning chapters when it was first referenced to see like, did I miss it? And at least I couldn't find it. It might have been, but also the formatting, I wish there were some more like breakouts or like call out boxes for some of these important terms to help make it clear, like MC means the MythCrafter. That's what QuasiReal and MythCraft calls the game master. Just some of these acronyms, I wish there was clearer, like, these are what these acronyms mean. I know there is a glossary and stuff like that in the back that you can flip and reference to. So, they aren't leaving you completely out in the cold. And similarly, I feel like the layout of this book is not the most user-friendly or accessible. They do a good job, like the chapter headings, clear. The class headings are clear. But there are some subheadings that they just have used the same font and just changed the sizing of, but not significantly enough that, especially in the class section, I was looking through and was finding a little hard to like tell which heading section I was under. And I think as you're reading it, and then especially going back to reference, I think that makes it a little bit hard to read. I would have liked to have seen maybe one of those underlined or bolded, something that made it a little bit stand out because the font size difference is not as clear. The artwork in the book is fine. It's not like, it's good artwork. There's a little bit of inconsistency of the level of detail. That's probably just a matter of like how much money they had to spend on artwork, and some of the pieces are a little less finished or less polished, but gives you an idea of the kinds of characters you can create and a little taste of the world. Again, because we don't have that setting info, it's really more just, I have an idea of the kinds of creatures that exist in this world that are the player creatures. Now, if you're interested in running MythCraft, you are going to have to get a different book, or you are going to have to reference the wiki. This is a player core. On the back cover of the book, they do reference the MythCrafters Compendium as well as the bestiary, but there are no rules for or instructions for running this game or info about the other kinds of creatures or monsters or NPCs that exist in this world. So that is why I really wish that they called this the player core, because it is not a core rulebook. It does not give you everything you need to be able to play this game. It gives a player everything they need to create a character and play in this game, but it is not a core rulebook. Now, how does this stack up against similar D20 systems? I think if you are a big fan of Pathfinder, you're going to like MythCraft. It has that like level of crunch. It offers a little bit more, I think a little bit more options as far as character customization, and not getting like locked into things. There might be the crunch feels like some of it might be a little less specific as Pathfinder. Like you might have some abilities that are more broadly applicable. But if you are somebody who really likes D&D and found Pathfinder too crunchy, then I don't think you're going to like MythCraft. I think it is enough of a medium crunch to crunchy game that you gotta like crunch to enjoy this game. So for the price of $55 for the hard book, I think that's maybe a little steep, especially not having the setting info in here. I love that they have all the rules on the wiki. That does make it really nice if you want to quickly reference something. Sometimes being able to look something up in a wiki is faster than the rule book. But if I were picking this book up in my local gaming store and came home and realized I don't have the GM info in here, I don't have the setting info, I think I'd be a little bit disappointed for the price tag. Again, if this said player core, I think that would be clearer, like, oh, I do need those 3 books for my whole table to sit down and play this game. If you are interested in MythCraft, I would suggest you head on over to their backer kit. They are currently running a campaign for a enhanced version of MythCraft. So that might be a really great thing to go check out if this does sound like something that you are interested in. And if you're interested in winning your own copy, there's a link in the description with instructions. Make sure that you are subscribed and leave a comment on this video, and we will pick one lucky winner in the US and Canada, excluding Montreal, to ship a hardcover copy to you. So have you picked up MythCraft? Have you tried it out based off of this book or the PDF or even just using the wiki? I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye. Cool. Great. Awesome. Nope.